Good morning. How is everyone this morning? Tired? Why? Think it'd be holiday season or something? Well, I'm so glad to be here with you this morning, and if you don't know who I am, my name's Bryan, and it's just my privilege to share God's word with you. We are going to be in Matthew chapter 1 this morning, so if you've got a Bible with you, whether that's on a device or a hard copy, now would be a great time to find it. If you don't have that, no worries, it'll be up on the screen anyway. What is the greatest Christmas film? Do you have a go-to film that you watch every Christmas? Maybe some of you do, right? Maybe Wonderful Life. Anyone watched that one? Yeah. Christmas Vacation, maybe. Die Hard, is that a Christmas film? Maybe not. Other ones, right? Polar Express. I like Arthur Christmas myself. That's a pretty good one. But my favorite Christmas film is actually Lord of the Rings. You might go, wait, Lord of the Rings? How can that be a Christmas film? Well, you know, the Lord of the Rings came out like on 3 successive Decembers, right before Christmas. The first one was back in 2001. I know, it seems like a long time ago now. But I was so excited, and in fact, I might even have gone to see it on Christmas Eve. And I was excited when that film came out because, you know, there was something about that film that connected way back to my childhood, which is kind of what Christmas is about a little bit, isn't it? That it connects you right back to your beginning, your childhood. And I first read Tolkien, I think, probably when I was about 10 years old, maybe. And like most people, started with The Hobbit, right? And then after The Hobbit, read Lord of the Rings, and then I was like in, and, you know, read all his other stuff after that. And ever since then, the world of hobbits and wizards and elves and dwarves has really just been with me, part of my life, you know. And like you know, maybe if you read those books when you were young too, maybe it's hard now, the films have come out, but you know, you had in your own mind what all these characters looked like and sounded like, right? And so when the film came out, it's like, well, you know, it's going to be really cool to see it on the screen, but is it going to really match my idea of how all that is? And I'm not going to get into the debate of film versus books and all that kind of stuff, because we'll be here all day debating that, and we won't get to the bottom of it anyway. And you think, well, Bryan, where are you going with all this? Well, we're going to start a new series this morning. And I admit I stole the title, not from The Lord of the Rings, but actually from The Hobbit. And the series that we're going to call it this morning is called Unexpected Journeys. Unexpected Journeys. And just to remind ourselves, and so we can ease into this, I've got a little clip here. And remember how Bilbo Baggins' journey began in The Hobbit, and what the conversation was that led to his unexpected journey. Guess I should.
Good morning.
What do you mean? Do you mean to wish me a good morning, or do you mean that it is a good morning whether I want it or not? Or perhaps you mean to say that you feel good on this particular morning? Or are you simply stating that this is a morning to be good on?
All of them at once, I suppose. Can I help you?
That remains to be seen. I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
An adventure? No, I don't imagine anyone west of Bree would have much interest in adventures. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things. Make you late for dinner. Good morning.
To think that I should have lived to bid good morning my Belladonna Took's son, as if I were selling buttons at the door.
Beg your pardon?
You've changed, and not entirely for the better, Bilbo Baggins.
I'm sorry, do I know you?
Well, you know my name, although you don't remember I belong to it. I'm Gandalf. And Gandalf means... me.
Not Gandalf, the wandering wizard who made such excellent fireworks. Oh, Took used to have them on Midsummer's Eve. No idea you were still in business.
And where else should I be?
Well,
Well, I'm pleased to find you remember something about me. Even if it's only my fireworks. Yes. Well, that's decided. It'll be very good for you. And most amusing for me. I shall inform the others.
inform the who? What? No, no. No, wait. We do not want any adventures here. Thank you. Not today. No. I suggest you try over the hill or across the water. Good morning.
Well, we could. You know, journeys often just start with a simple conversation, don't they? And I think I look in my life, and that's kind of where a lot of my journeys have started, just with a simple conversation. And you don't even realize where that journey is going to take you. Just like Bilbo, you don't get the implications of that. You know, if you're caught in that conversation there that Gandalf had with Bilbo, there was a little tiny bit about his ancestry, right? If you read in the book, there's a lot more detail about that. And that is actually the basis of Gandalf choosing Bilbo. And that's why he's been going on this unexpected journey on this great adventure. And so what about us this morning? Because what is our ancestry like? And maybe your family tree, as you look back, is just overflowing with swashbuckling adventurers. But maybe, on the other hand, it's few and far between, right, to find that in your family tree. But it may surprise you to know that, you know, as we are part of Jesus' family, that we have an incredible ancestry that we can look on back. And we have this ancestry which invites us in on this unexpected journey that is full of adventure and full of promise. So we're going to read Matthew chapter 1 and 1 through 17. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. And Judah the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar, and Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Ram, and Ram the father of Amminadab, and Amminadab the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David the king. And David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah, and Solomon the father of Rehoboam, and Rehoboam the father of Abijah, and Abijah the father of Asaph, and Asaph the father of Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat the father of Joram, and Joram the father of Uzziah, and Uzziah the father of Jotham, and Jotham the father of Ahaz, and Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, and Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, and Manasseh the father of Amos, and Amos the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jeconiah, and his brothers at the time of the deportation to Babylon. And after this deportation to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel, and Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel, and Zerubbabel the father of Abiud, and Abiud the father of Eliakim, and Eliakim the father of Azor, and Azor the father of Zadok, and Zadok the father of Achim, and Achim the father of Eliud, and Eliud the father of Eleazar, and Eleazar the father of Mathan, and Mathan the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus was born, who is called Christ. So all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations, and from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the deportation to Babylon to the Christ, 14 generations. You know, when you read The Hobbit, right? The Hobbit starts out, in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. You know, that is a great opening sentence, isn't it? And it just makes you want to know more about what this hole in the ground is and what a hobbit is. And that's really what a great opening sentence does in a book, doesn't it? Because it just wants to draw you in so that you get to learn more. I mean, any good writer, any good speaker knows that about the opening, that is critical, right? That it just, you've got to get that right, because if you lose your audience at the beginning, you're done, right? They're just going to drift off and you're never going to get them back again. Here's some more great opening lines. You can guess, see if you know who these are, all right? There was a boy called Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. Do you know who that is? Yeah, that's right. The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. This is the story of how I died. That's the film Tangled. There are some fish that cannot be caught. It's not that they are faster or stronger than any other fish. They're just touched by something extra. Big fish, yeah. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. This is a hard one. It's Tolstoy, Anna Karenina. You know, those are great opening lines, aren't they? And they just grab you and wind you in, and it got you hooked on the story. But old Matthew, he doesn't start his book off that way at all, does he? He starts it off with a genealogy. Now, I know that Matthew was a tax collector, but mate, come on, surely you could do a little better starting your story off than that, can't you? I mean, a genealogy? How many of us read genealogies for fun? I mean, maybe, if we want to get to sleep at night, you might crack open Chronicles there and start reading all that begats and begots if you've got a King James version, right? And you'll be out in about 2 minutes, after reading all that stuff, because, genealogies just really aren't our thing, are they? And I know Luke has a genealogy in his gospel too, but at least it's 3 chapters in, right? He's already started off with this great story, so he's got you hooked already. So, he can dump a genealogy on you and know that he's going to keep you with him. But not Matthew. He goes bang, straight in. Biblios Genesios, literally a book of genealogy. And you can kind of feel the excitement drain away. What are all these names, and who are all these people, and why should I really care about any of them? Except we should, because we should get that excitement back immediately, because we read about whose genealogy that is. The genealogy of Jesus Christ. So why should we be so excited about the genealogy of someone called Jesus Christ? And especially the Christ part. I read one commentator, and he was talking about how we just don't understand sometimes the significance of Christ. That we just kind of tack it on the end of Jesus' name, right? As if it's some kind of formality, like when you check into a hotel and they ask you for your surname and, that kind of thing. But the significance of Christ is so important. Because Christ means the anointed one, the Messiah, God's chosen. The person that Israel has been waiting for to lead them on this journey of adventure with God, out of their present predicament. But before they're willing to go on a journey with the Messiah, with God's chosen one, they have to be absolutely sure and certain that this is the Messiah, that he is the one, that he is worth going on a journey with, right? Because they don't want to go off on a journey with someone who's not the Messiah. What is his ancestry? And in particular, there are two people that they want to be able to trace his ancestry back to. Two names that come after Jesus Christ. The first is Abraham and the second is David. Is Jesus related to Abraham and is Jesus related to David? Now, the more discerning amongst you might have spotted that there's kind of this flaw, right, as we trace back genealogy, because Jesus doesn't have any of Joseph's DNA, right? It's like, well, how can he trace his genealogy back through Joseph when, biologically speaking, he's not related to Joseph? But Matthew, see, he's not actually interested in the biological relationship to Joseph. He's interested in the legal relationship to Joseph. And because Jesus is legally Joseph's son, therefore he can legally trace his ancestry all the way back through Joseph's line. Joseph, if you like, gives Jesus that legal right as his father. And you might think, well, so what? Why should I care about any of this, right? This is like Old Testament stuff, and, you know, what is the point of reading all this and talking about this morning? Well, because our DNA doesn't go back to Abraham and David either, right? And we don't have a father that gives us a legal right either. I mean, and so there's two critical names that we talked about, Abraham and David, and God gave Abraham and David two promises. And we do want to be able to trace back to those two promises. So how are we going to do that? Because what right do we have to those two promises that God made in the Old Testament to Abraham and David? Well, we have the right through Jesus, because Jesus takes us on that unexpected journey all the way back to Abraham and David. And it kind of starts with origin. This genealogy is split into three sections. We have Abraham to David, we have David to Jeconiah, and then we have Jeconiah to Joseph. 3 lots of 14 generations, Matthew says at the end there. If you look at the numeric value of David's name, it actually adds up to 14, but I won't bore you with all that. But that's, again, I think of Matthew, tax collector numbers. Maybe he was interested in that, and he's got this balanced genealogy in 3 sections. Now, if you were to go back and look at the years and the names and everything, he's been a little selective to get to his 14 generations. But the Greek word geneo, it doesn't just mean parent or father, it also means ancestor. So Matthew is saying that these people are the ancestors of so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're the parent. We have a deep longing to be connected to our origins, don't we? It always surprised me when I first came to the US that I would be talking to people and right out of the blue, suddenly someone would say, well, of course I'm Italian. So, wait, what? Or I'm Irish. I say, well, you don't sound very Irish. Have you ever been to Ireland? Well, no, but that's where my family is from. And they just really connected back to their origin, even though they'd never, ever been there at all. Now, maybe, we all have family trees. I don't know. Some of us can go back, maybe some distance, right? I have a family tree, can probably go back 400, maybe 500 years fairly accurately. After that, it becomes kind of wishful thinking, you know. But it certainly doesn't go all the way back to Abraham. But if you were Jewish, your family tree better go all the way back to Abraham in some very verifiable kind of fashion. And even more so, if you're claiming to be the Messiah, it definitely better go back to Abraham. And why did it need to go back to Abraham? Because God gave Abraham a promise. Abraham, kind of like Bilbo, was just minding his business, wasn't he? Yeah. And God came along and said, Abraham, I want you to leave your family and your homeland, and I want you to go to a country that I will show you. He didn't even tell him where he was going. And God promised him that if he did that I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And that's what Abraham did, didn't he? He left his homeland, he left his family, and he went on this journey with God, and he had many unexpected adventures, right? Some of his own making, some of other people's making, but he followed God. And yet, as the author of Hebrews reminds us, that Abraham actually never got that promise fulfilled. In fact, the author of Hebrews in chapter 11, he lists all these great ancestors of the faith, doesn't he? And still they didn't have their promise fulfilled, because that fulfillment of the promise awaited someone else. And as we look back maybe at our origins, and maybe where our families came from, maybe just the beginning of our lives, and maybe we started off with great promise, right? Full of anticipation about where this journey and adventure of life was going to lead us. And over the years, maybe some of that promise didn't work out quite like we hoped. And maybe some of those promises just didn't materialize. And life didn't go the way that we wanted it to go, or our ancestors wanted it to go. And we'd love to get back to the origin and have that blessing again. Maybe, in fact, sometimes we can look back at origins and sometimes they're kind of a curse, right? Rather than a blessing. And we'd love to find the promise that God made to Abraham, but we're not related to Abraham because he's not in our family tree. So how can we share in that promise? Is it closed to us? Well, it's not, is it? Because of Jesus Christ, because he comes as the Messiah who is related. In fact, not only is he related, Jesus predates Abraham. He is the one that actually gave Abraham the promise, if you like. And he also fulfills the promise. One time you can read in John chapter 8 that Jesus is having this argument with the Jews, and it's all about ancestry and origins and where he comes from and where they come from, right? And they're telling Jesus, well, you're a Samaritan, your origins are all wrong. You can't be the Messiah, but we're okay because our father is Abraham. And Jesus tells them, if your father was Abraham, Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. And then he goes, and the Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? And Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. That I am, by the way, is critical in John's gospel. Ego eimi, he is clearly stating that he is God. And so they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. You see, if we have Jesus in our ancestry, if we've invited him into our lives, he is the source of Abraham's blessing, and he passes that on to us so that that becomes part of our family too. And more than that, we can't be like Abraham as well, and we can go out and bless people as Jesus has blessed us. Secondly, often people go on an ancestral journey looking for someone who is outstanding. There's some outstanding names in Jesus' genealogy: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, Solomon, Hezekiah, Josiah. But there's kind of one name that leaps out of us. And that name, of course, is David, right? David. I don't know, maybe you have some outstanding names in your family tree as you look back. People have done great things. I have a couple of ancestors in my family tree who were ministers in the 17th century, which is kind of cool. But apart from that, not a lot. You know, I thought in the future generations that people would look back and they go, oh, that Bryan, he was the first one that came to Oregon. But a few years ago, when my dad was still alive and he liked all this stuff, he had a trunk of like family stuff, right? And we were looking through this trunk and there was this packet of postcards. And guess where they were from? The Columbia River Gorge from like 1920 something. So I'm not even the first one here. So there goes my claim to fame, right? You know, it's great if you can find someone though, isn't it? You know, you have a great ancestor in the past and it just kind of sets you up for years, the family down the road, doesn't it? And you can dine out on their names and on their stories for years to come. But at some point that kind of comes to an end, doesn't it? And that's kind of what had happened to the Jews, really. That they'd kind of been dining out on David's exploits and who David was for a long time, but that had come to an end. And life for them right now was really not that outstanding. But when the Messiah comes, he's going to take us back to the way it was with David. And it's going to return to be outstanding again. Let's just remind ourselves of God's promise to David. Because like Abraham, God had made this promise to David. David was talking to Nathan one time, and he said, you know, I'd really like to build God a house. Don't you think that would be a good idea, Nathan? Nathan said, yeah, mate, that would be a great idea. You go for it. But that night, God appeared in a vision to Nathan, and he spoke to Nathan and said, no, you need to go back and talk to David and tell him he is not going to build a house for me, but rather I am going to build a house for him. Not a house out of bricks and mortar, but a dynasty. And he says, and your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever. But for the Jews at Jesus' birth, you know, there hadn't been a descendant of David sitting on the throne for years. And the king that they had now, Herod the Great, he wasn't even really a Jew. So they needed someone outstanding again. It strikes me that today there's a lot of people looking for someone outstanding to come along, right? If I could just find someone outstanding, maybe they could fix my life, maybe they could fix my country, maybe they could do this, maybe they could do that. Sometimes we try to be our own David, right? We want to be outstanding in ourselves and earn our own promises through our adventures, but that's not what we've been given. You need, I think of Jesus, and you know that's why the Jews didn't really recognize Jesus, because he just wasn't outstanding in the way that they wanted him to be outstanding, right? Well, yeah, he healed a few people and did some nice stuff, but it was hardly David's stuff, was it? Jesus wasn't out there with his sling and finding the biggest Roman soldier and whack, you know. That would have been outstanding in the Jews' sight, but all this other stuff, not so outstanding at all. Not especially compared to what had come before in their mind. Jesus was having this discussion with the Pharisees about whose son they thought the Christ would be. And they emphatically said, he will be David's son. And Jesus said to them, how is it then that David in the Spirit calls him Lord, saying, The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. If then David calls him Lord, how is he his son? Because the idea is that the ancestor is more outstanding than the descendant, right? And yet Jesus is saying, well, how come then David, who is your outstanding ancestor, is saying that his descendant is going to be even more outstanding? And that's who we have in our ancestry, Jesus Christ, who brings us into his family, and his works never die. They never cease. They never stop. His promise never ends. God bless you too. And lastly, in our ancestral journey, you will find outsiders. You may notice some of the names in Jesus' ancestry are kind of dubious, right, to say the least, especially if you were a Jew reading this list. And maybe in your family history, you have some people, probably some ancestors that maybe that are talked about, and some ancestors that maybe, we don't talk about them so much because they don't really live up to the family reputation. I have a couple of those, and I'm not going to talk about them. So, and you think that God, when he had Jesus' ancestry in mind, that he wouldn't have included any of those people in Jesus' ancestry, right? That he wouldn't have had anyone with broken lives who are unattached to God. But there are some in Jesus' ancestry. I'll be careful with the stories here because, although I see there's no kids here. So, so we started off with Tamar, right? who wasn't a Jew. And if you remember that her story is that she originally was married to one of the sons of Judah, and then he died. And then, as tradition was, then she married the next son of Judah, and he died. And then she was promised to be married to the third son of Judah, but he was like, well, she's kind of this black widow, and I don't think I want my son because, look what happened to the last two. And so he held her back from her. But Tamar was determined to have a son through that family, and so she, through subterfuge, she gained a son from Judah, right? So it's kind of dodgy kind of stuff, but nonetheless, she's in Jesus' family tree. Rahab, she was a prostitute, and she was a Canaanite. She lived in Jericho, and she, if you remember the story, she hid the Hebrew spies that came into Jericho. And because she did that, she bargained with them to be saved and her family saved, and she became not only into Israel, but here we find her also in the family tree of Jesus. And then we have Ruth. And we all love the story of Ruth, and she's an incredible character and person. But remember, she's a Moabite. And Moabites, as far as Israel were concerned, and no, they're not coming in, right? And we may remember where the Moabites came from. That came from an incestuous relationship at the very beginning. And yet here she is, included in Jesus' ancestry. And then we have the wife of Uriah. Of course, we know her as Bathsheba and the adulterous relationship that David had with her. And Uriah, of course, he was a Hittite. He wasn't an Israelite. He didn't belong to Jews. All of them outsiders. They had absolutely no claim on the promise that God had made. And maybe another name on that list is actually Mary herself. She was a Jew, but she's young, she's unmarried, and she's pregnant. I can imagine people scratching her name off their family tree, right? We don't talk about her. We don't want to talk about her. And probably all of us, as we look back in our lives, we have things in our lives, brokenness in our lives that we would like to scratch off out of our lives. But we can't do that, can we? Because that's just part and parcel of who we are. But God takes us and our brokenness, and he invites us into our family, into his family rather. And he uses us because he wants all of us, right? No matter what, no matter how outside we might be. Paul, writing to the Galatians, says that Christ redeemed us from the curses of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, "Cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree," so that in Christ Jesus the blessing of Abraham might come to the Gentiles, so that we might receive the promised Spirit through faith. Jesus is the one that brings all outsiders into the family of God. You know, I hope you watched some good Christmas films this season. And it doesn't really matter, though, which films you watch. What really matters is, have you had a conversation with Jesus Christ? Have you accepted his invitation to come on this unexpected journey with him? And yeah, it's going to be full of all kinds of adventures that you can't possibly comprehend. But he is going to take you on a journey. He's going to take us on an adventure that is ultimately fulfilled through him because of the promises that God made to Abraham and to David. And we are related to all of that through Christ. Daniel and Chris are going to come up and we're going to play the next song. And I invite you at this time to grab communion. The elements that are back there are on the table. And I want you to think of this morning as we sing this next song about how God has blessed you through Abraham and through David and fulfilled that in his son, Jesus Christ.